All right, hey Quants, we're going to do something a little bit different today. I've been going over, when I've been going over BTC analysis, I've been showing the master strategy that was brought to my attention a few years ago. And on one of the previous streams, I did mention that you could easily implement this through AI. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. So we'll do a little bit of BTC analysis, not much. There's not really much going on right now, but after I do that, then we'll jump into doing a little bit of code just for fun. So just real quick, if we're looking at the original, those support lines, I was showing this the other day. It looks like we're still under the highest support line here, still trying to break through there. Obviously it's dropped off or quite a bit. Honestly, we're still sitting at like 121,000, which we're high relative to the market, in my opinion. And that does remind me, something I've been speculating about is the idea that maybe the game this cycle is going to just be a slow grind, and I've heard other people talk about this, and it is a potential argument for a longer cycle than the 4-year cycle, which is not something that I'm bought into just yet. I want to see the 4-year cycle play out, and then if it continues, I'll be sold on that idea. But anyways, the idea is that I have a lot of friends that have approached me about crypto, and they didn't get in. They just felt it's too late. And so it kind of makes you wonder, with the way that the movements have been going, it feels really slow to me. And so I'm just curious if we're going to see kind of a slow grind up, potentially keeping investors, or specifically retail investors, on the sideline, feeling that they've already missed the move and there's just nothing that they can do about it. But eventually, when you start seeing that big euphoric move, or if we do see that big euphoric move, then it would be when we see retail getting sucked in and providing liquidity for the people who've already been in for a long time, exiting their positions. And so anyways, it's something I've been kind of playing around with in my just talking with some of my friends about. It would be interesting to see if we just see these slow grinds up, a small base created, a slow grind up, a small base created, and then eventually we get the blow off move. And then that's when retail starts getting sucked in, because then they really feel like they're missing the move. But in reality, they've missed the move from the slow grind up. So in any case, let's go ahead and jump into some code. And full disclosure, I ran through this earlier using one of the AI models that I thought would work, and it ultimately did work, and I created a prompt, but it took a little bit of prompt engineering, just to get it to work right. And so ultimately, I really wanted this to work one shot, because I've done this in the past and it has worked with one shot, and I believe that was back in GPT 4.0 days, maybe GPT 3 days. So I don't know if the models are just trying to be too smart now, or if it's just this specific model that was getting hung up on a lot of things. And so I do have a prompt that I expect to work with one shot, which doesn't necessarily demonstrate exactly how you would do it. The language is fairly easy. I just had to add in a few specifics to get it to do it exactly the way that I wanted it to do it. And when I say exactly the way I wanted to do it, what I mean by that is I wanted to be able to simply have a replication of this master strategy that I've been using. So what is this master strategy? It's only four moving averages, right? So I have a 200 EMA, a 200 SMA, an 8 EMA, and a 21 EMA. And so for the slower moving averages, for the faster moving averages that sit up top here, these change colors when they cross. And so that's fairly simple. But there is a little bit of a nuance, and I realized this when I was creating the prompt, is that oftentimes you would see both signals be different colors or opposite colors, but the way that this indicator works is they're the same color. And so when they're both moving up, but it's not based on a slope in this case, right? So what I mean by that is when you have the 821 or the 8 EMA above the 21 EMA, it's going to be green. And when the 21 EMA is below the 8 EMA, it is also going to be green. And so that's kind of the nuance with this with the coloring of this indicator, and the idea is like when they're green, that's the bullish signal, right? So we're looking for them both to be green, and they will be when they cross, right? So because they simply change colors when they cross. And then conversely, when the fast EMA, in this case the 8, crosses below the slow EMA, then they're both going to change colors to be kind of the negative color, right? So red and purple or whatever. I know a lot of people will play the colors so that they don't create biases on that, but in any case, there's a specific nuance with the language and how you write that. So for the 200 EMA and the 200 SMA, these flip based on the slope. So when the slope changes on either of these, we'll see the colors flip-flop. And so that, I think that's fairly simplistic to understand there. So I'll just stop there and go over to the chat application that I use for interacting with most LLMs. And when I'm coding, what I tend to do is I'll be in Cursor. So Cursor is an IDE that has some LLMs built in, and so you can do some coding right there, which makes it easier if you're doing a lot of coding. A lot of people, you'll see them demonstrate using some kind of a chat interface application and then copying the code over, and that's what I'm going to be doing this time. So I still use one of those, and the one that I like is T3 Chat. This was created by a developer, and the goal of this one was to just basically have a better interface than all other LLMs, and I think he's done a very good job at accomplishing that. On top of that, the price point, the value is just, there's a lot of value there compared to other chat applications. A lot of other chat applications will charge you $20 a month, and all you get is that individual model. By using T3 Chat, if I hadn't mentioned, that's the name of the application, is T3 Chat. You have access to most popular models and also some models that are not so popular. The individual Theo that created this, and so he has a passion for testing all these things out and playing with them. So he has his company set up such that he ends up getting a notification whenever new models are released, and so they tend to land in this interface fairly quickly, and you'll be able to find them and test them out if you'd like to do that. So for this example, I mentioned that I wanted to use an LLM that I thought would work, and it didn't work out as well as I had hoped initially. And so I'm using Grok 4 Fast. I think what I'm going to do here is I will probably run through this example because I did create the prompt and there were some nuances that it just wasn't getting right. And so I think I fixed the language so that the model is getting it correct with a one-shot. And so I'll just go through those. And then what I want to do is I want to switch over to a model that I tend to use more frequently for coding. And the model that I tend to use most frequently for coding is GPT-5. And so you'll hear about the Sonnet models. And I do think that the Sonnet models are good, but they also tend to be very expensive. And so if you're using tools that have subscription plans associated to them, you'll usually get access to some of those tokens. But if you're doing a ton of coding and using those models very frequently, you can burn through that very quickly. And so GPT-5 seems to be as good, if not better, than a lot of the Sonnet models currently, and it's cheaper. And so you end up being able to use a lot more prompts and that, and just getting farther with coding with those. So let's go through the prompt. And this has one of the pieces that I was trying to correct originally. So let me get it back to the state. So we're going to create a PineScript indicator. It's very important that you tell it to create a PineScript indicator. PineScript is not a common language. A lot of people are not going to be familiar with PineScript, and as a result, most of these LLMs are not going to choose PineScript when you tell them to build an indicator. They're typically going to use Python. And so I've seen examples where individuals will try to create a script and they end up with Python, and if they're not familiar with coding, they're pasting Python into TradingView, which obviously isn't going to work because they're just two different languages. And the Python that they write is probably correct, or very likely correct, because LLMs are very good at Python and they're very good at JavaScript because they have a lot of data to train on those. But it's obviously not what we're trying to accomplish here, right? So create a PineScript indicator that is a trend following indicator. It has 4 moving averages, which I spelled wrong, not that it got mixed up on that part. We have a 200 SMA. We want the color dark dark aqua, and I used aqua. That was one of the things that I noticed with this specific model. It would try to put in dark. I was saying cyan initially, and so it would say dark dot cyan, which isn't an actual color. I thought it would be smart enough to just pick out a color, a hex value that was close enough, but this model failed at that. So dark aqua when the slope is up, and purple when the slope is down, a 200 EMA. The color is aqua when the slope is up, and dark when the slope is down. Dark red when the slope is down. So for the other ones, we have an 8 EMA, and I just put in quotes fast so that I can reference it with fast, and similarly with the other one I said slow so I can reference it with slow. So color light green when the fast EMA is above the slow EMA, and red when the fast is below the slow EMA. And then the other one, the last one, is the 21 EMA slow. Color dark green when the slow EMA is below the fast EMA. That's that language nuance that I was talking about. And dark red when the slow EMA is above the fast EMA. And another point that I will mention here, I have a couple more comments. Let me just go ahead and go over those real quick. So a couple more comments here. So use version 6. By default, it tried to use version 5. I don't think that, I mean, that kind of seems obvious to me that it would do that because it's most likely trained on that older data. And then you also have don't use multi-line statements. I've seen a lot of these LLMs try to break them up into multi-line statements, which you can do with a lot of statements, but with PineScript, because it's white space sensitive, you have to indent it, and then you have to add an additional space, and that has some weird intricacies where it doesn't always work. Maybe it should work, but I have a lot of problems myself when I try to do multi-line statements, just getting the format right so that the compiler, the PineScript compiler, will actually compile a code without breaking. And every time I've seen an LLM try to do this, they'll oftentimes break things into multi-line sentences or multi-line statements, which does make sense from a readability standpoint. It makes it a lot easier to read. However, when you copy and paste it, it won't compile. And so I just told it to ignore that so that I don't run into those specific issues. And then use colors defined in PineScript or color.new. And so this goes back to what I was saying about the colors. It was trying to use colors that were dark dot green, for example, which doesn't exist. Again, I thought it would just be smart enough to know use color.new, because that's a thing that's been around forever. The palettes may have changed. However, it's still a very limited palette, and so dark green, for example, or dark dot green doesn't exist. And so I put that in there just as another nuance to handle that. And then the last thing that I want to mention, as far as a piece that I iterated over a few times to make sure that I got this right for the LLM, was when I was going over the 8 EMA and the 21 EMA. The original statement I had put in said when it crosses over, or when it crossed over, and it would color it the instant it crossed over, but then it would switch the color back to red, even though it had crossed over and stayed crossed over, and so it wasn't getting that consistent color on the flip. And so I don't think that's something I've seen other models when I use that type of language, specifically GPT models. When I use that, I haven't seen it mess that up, but Grok 4 Fast specifically did mess that up. So that's why in there I'm using the language when it's above and when it's below versus cross or crossed. So just some nuances there. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we can get some code here. As I mentioned before, I did run this before. I did have it work, and so my expectation is this is going to work, but we will see. So this is one of the examples that it created before. It doesn't look like this is the same exact example, and look at this. It's even doing multi-line statements, even though I told it not to. So bad model, not listening to directions. So I'm guessing this probably isn't going to compile, but I'm going to try anyways. It looks like it did. Oh, I think this is the first time I have ever seen those statements come through as multi-line statements and not be broken. So good job there. Now, if we're looking up here, let's go ahead and I'm going to hide the original master strategy indicator just to look at this other one. And so out of the gate, I shouldn't be shocked, right? I said that this should work because I've tested this before, even though the code was formatted slightly different. I didn't do a double take to see if the code I previously had was the exact same code. I see the model, even though when I'd prompted, it'd come up with totally different strategies on how to implement this. One example is that it would be using the TA rising and TA falling APIs versus using greater than, less than type of things, and so logic. And so all that said, it does look like it's correct here. So we have some slope changing here, and an easy way to test this is just I'm clicking this on and off and seeing if the colors match up, which it does look like they match up, right? So yeah, so that's one way to come through and do a prompt here. For this specific indicator, you would now be able to use this if you wanted to use this in one of the products that we offer, like if use it in the product like the Skeleton Key, for example, which is available through Quant Prime AI, then you would be able to reference these slopes and that indicator, and then you'd be able to create strategies off of that. So that is not the exact same way that I created this indicator, because this indicator was an indicator that I built way before I ever built the Skeleton Key. And as I mentioned in the past, it was the first strategy that I ever built that worked out, and I just continued to follow it for a few years, watching it play out. And so all that said, you could still create a simple trend following indicator that reflects the same thing, and then plug that into the Skeleton Key and get a strategy that works out the same way. So let's see. Then the last thing I wanted to mention, let's go ahead and switch models here. So I want to, what I'm going to do instead of, so as I mentioned, the T3 chat has a really nice interface in my opinion. One of the things that we can do here is I could just switch the model down. I could switch the model down here, and then I could just repaste the same prompt. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say retry the message. And when I say retry message, I can actually have the option of changing which model I choose here. And so that's a very convenient way just to test out some different models or different outputs if you want. There's also a way to fork this. So if you fork this, it's going to create another chat, and then you can iterate on it that way if you don't want to muddy up your chat with additional context that you might not want to have in this chat, and you're just playing with something. So the OpenAI model, I expect this to work. I kind of expect all of these to work now. So let's just go to GPT-5. Let's see what GPT-5 comes up with. I don't know if it's going to be the exact same thing, but it looks smaller code, version 6. Did they get version 6? I didn't check. Yeah, so version 6 there. So let's save this and see if it worked out right. And so looks like, I'm just going to pick a couple areas here where it looks like it should be flipping right. So this, and I'm just spot checking here, right? Obviously I'm not doing a thorough check to make sure it got every area, but there are quite a few areas here where there are some small changes where I would expect to see those would line up pretty obviously. And if they don't, I think you could easily pick that out. So one thing I didn't check though was like, here's the, slow, let's check one. Yeah, so right here's somewhere with the slow EMA, the 200 for the 200s are changing. So because I wasn't actually checking that before on the other one. So yeah, so we're still seeing those changes there. So that one seemed to work. Well, I'll just do, obviously that was pretty quick. We're just going to do one more because I'm curious. I wonder how the Gemini model will work. And so Flash, which one should we try here? I do use Flash a lot because it is one of the cheapest models, and I'm kind of curious where there's 2 instances of that. I haven't noticed that. I wonder if that's a bug on their side. Anyways, let's go ahead and just try Flash. And so Flash is a very lightweight in terms of cost model, and it is, as noted, fast. And so it looks like that finished pretty quick. Let's save it and let's see if we get a working instance. Oh, see, yeah, here's this dark red. So even though I told it not to do that stuff, it still used dark red, which is not ideal. So this is the kind of thing that I was cleaning up on the last one. So not too surprised to see that, but let's pick a color. Maroon is kind of a dark red color, right? So we'll just put in maroon, And let's see if that compiles and if that works. Oh, light green. Yep, same. I didn't see all of them. There's a dark green there now that I'm looking at it. So let's do lime and then let's do green. And just a quick spot check. It looks like that has everything there. And let's see if the colors, if the indicator actually works. So it wasn't, as you can see, it wasn't too challenging just to go and pick regular colors. But if you're completely new to any of this, then I can see where that's going to trip some people up and they might get stuck. And so it's flipping. These colors are not, they don't look quite as nice, the colors that they're using here. So aqua, maroon, could just be like this line. Did it pick a specific size for that line? It did not. So, but we can go ahead and, looks like they use the same color multiple times. That's one of the reasons you just don't see the same kind of color changes there. But ultimately, it looks like it's getting it correct. Let's just check this area down here. And so even using something like a very simple model, and I say simple, it's an LLM, so obviously there's complexity behind it, but a model like Gemini can produce an indicator like this fairly easily. So that's going to be it for today. Peace, quants.